Labor Sunday. You may be very well aware that Labor Day was first celebrated in New York City on September 5th, 1882. You may also know that it became a national holiday by vote of Congress supported by President Grover Cleveland in 1894. Cynics say that Cleveland was eager to build bridges with the unions after he intervened in the Pullman strike of 1893, and this holiday seemed like a good way to do it. Labor Day was designated as the first Monday of September in order to celebrate the strength and esprit de corps of the trade and labor organizations. But perhaps you didn't know that by resolution of the American Federation of Labor in 1909, this Sunday before Labor Day was designated Labor Sunday, a day of reflection on the spiritual meaning of the labor movement. You wouldn't be alone if you didn't know that. Usually this weekend passes as a big marker of the end of summer. Like magic, it seems, the weather cools after this Labor Day Monday passes, and we're back to the busy schedule of work or church. It's a chance for a last hurrah before things get serious again. This congregation has taken this holiday so seriously, in fact, that this is the first time we're gathering for Sunday worship on this particular Sunday of the year in more than half a century. Yet of all the civil holidays that we honor in this nation, Labor Day is one of the ones that's most closely tied with our Unitarian and Universalist theologies. This morning we reflect on the spiritual significance of work and consider how we might be called to live and work if we are to be true to our faith. Our second reading is from the Lebanese spiritual teacher Khalil Gibran on work. Then a plowman said, "Speak to us of work." And he answered, saying, "You work that you may keep pace with the earth and the soul of the earth. For to be idle is to become a stranger unto the seasons, and to step out of life's procession that marches in majesty and proud submission toward the infinite. When you work, you are a flute through whose heart the whispering of the hours turns to music. Which of you would be a reed, dumb and silent, when all else sings together in unison? Always you have been told that work is a curse and labor a misfortune. But I say to you that when you work, you fulfill a part of earth's furthest dream, assigned to you when the dream was born. And in keeping yourself with labor, you are in truth loving life. And to love life's labor is to be intimate with life's innermost secret. I say that life is indeed a darkness, save where there is urge. And all urge is blind, save where there is knowledge. And all knowledge is vain, save where there is work. And all work is empty, save where there is love. And when you work with love, you bind yourself to yourself and to one another and to God. And what is it to work with love? It is to weave the cloth with threads drawn from your own heart, even as if your beloved were to wear the cloth. It is to build a house with affection, even as if your beloved were to dwell in the house. It is to sow seeds with tenderness and reap the harvest with joy, even as if your beloved were to eat the fruit. It is to charge all things you fashion with the breath of your own spirit, and to know that all the blessed dead are standing about you and watching. Work is love made visible. And if you cannot work with love, but only with distaste, it is better that you should leave your work and sit at the gate of the temple and take alms from those who work with joy. For if you bake bread with indifference, you bake a bitter bread that feeds but half a person's hunger. And if you grudge the crushing of grapes, your grudge distills a poison in the wine. And if you sing as angels but love not the singing, you muffle the listener's ears to the voices of the day and the voices of the night. Feelings. Have you ever felt like your work was to keep pace with the earth and the soul of the earth? Has your work ever felt so infused with love that it bound you to yourself, to your neighbor, to God? Have you ever worked with a love so deep that what you created was an offering that came from the depths of your being, flowing out of you like an infinite light? If you have, consider yourself the owner of a great blessing. If you can recall such a time when you worked in a way that was connected, soulful, an outpouring of your very self, I ask you, was the work that fulfilled that part of you something you were paid to do? Could you have made a living doing it? If you can answer yes to one or both of those questions, consider yourself lucky indeed. Perhaps part of a species in danger of extinction. It's part of the American dream that we can find work that fulfills our spirits, makes us feel connected and whole, and is profitable. From what color is your parachute to who moved my cheese, people have been trying to discern the proper channel for each of our inner voices of wisdom and light. Ultimately, we hope that whatever our gifts and talents and dreams, they can fit into what will pay the bills and keep a roof over our heads. If we're lucky, we've found something that makes that connection, and we look forward to going to work every day because what we do truly is an extension of who we are. And our doing and our being offer mutual fulfillment. We end a day or week of hard work feeling grateful, not grudging. For most workers in today's economy, though, there's no convergence of those greatest gifts and a paying job, and especially not at a level that pays enough to raise a family. The need to make a living trumps everything, sometimes even moral principles. More and more often, the compromise can even be the worker's dignity. Folks work for companies that are doing devastating things to the environment, that abuse workers in factories overseas, that operate unethically to boost profits. People are working longer and longer hours for the same pay and few, if any, benefits, grateful just for a job to go to. Feeling good about one's work and its impact on the world feels like an absolutely unattainable luxury for many of us. But we persist in the idea that hard work can actually take us from very humble means to great riches. We want to believe that our goodness, our value, can really be reflected in how profitable our work is. And we keep looking for secrets as to how to make that happen. You may have heard the old joke about the young man who asked an old rich man how he made his money. The old guy fingered his worsted wool vest and said, "Well, son, it was 1932, the depth of the Great Depression. I was down to my last nickel. I invested that nickel in an apple. I spent the entire day polishing the apple, and at the end of the day, I sold the apple for 10 cents. I spent the next morning investing in 2 apples. I spent the whole day polishing them and sold them at 5 p.m. for 20 cents. I continued this system for a month, by the end of which I'd accumulated a fortune of $3.50. Then my wife's father died and left us $10. The truth of that old joke is deep. It's become a fact that we cannot escape that our hard work and creativity don't matter a lot when it comes to succeeding in the current economy. Fewer and fewer people hold greater and greater amounts of the wealth, not just in the United States, but around the world. Creativity and personal hard work don't factor into financial success nearly as much as things like being in the right place at the right time, or the right place in the right family at the right time. Long before today's economic crisis, we were in a spiritual crisis about the nature of work. The idea that Khalil Gibran illustrates so beautifully, that work is love made visible. For most of us, the U.S. economy has become a flowery, romantic idea. There are bills to pay, there are mouths to feed. Getting the best paying job you can has trumped any idea that our work might bring forth some core part of our essence. We don't work to keep pace with the earth and the soul of the earth. We work to keep pace with our own consumerism. Yet we know that what we do shapes who we are, and who we are profoundly informs what we do. Our work gives shape to the meaning of our very existence. My mother's father was a farmer, a third-generation farmer in America, and came from a longer line of farmers in England and Germany. By the mid-1960s, it was getting harder for a small family farmer to make enough money to feed a growing family. Equipment was getting more and more expensive, and he had 5 daughters, no sons to carry on the work of the farm or his family name. So he made the difficult decision to sell a lot of his acreage, keep just enough to farm for the family and barter with neighbors, and to go to work himself in the local factory, producing heavy machinery. He wasn't the complaining type. He was someone who did what had to be done. But my mother and her sisters don't think he was ever the same after he went to work in that factory. A part of his identity was lost when he gave up farming as his main work. And he would return home from the factory too tired to even visit the fields that were his home. Who we are and what we do are so deeply intertwined that even when our paid work isn't exactly the expression of our very souls, the fact that we do something of worth that is beyond us is important to our psychological and spiritual health. Sister Joan Chittister writes, "Once upon a time, some disciples asked their rabbi, 'In the book of Elijah we read, everyone in Israel is duty-bound to say, when will my work approach the works of my ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? How are we to understand this? How could we in our time ever think that we could do what they could do?' And the rabbi explained, just as our ancestors invented new ways of serving, each a new service according to their own character, so each one of us in our own way must devise something new and of service to others to do what has not yet been done." We are not asked to do more than we can, Chittister writes. We are simply asked to do something in our own time that has value. We are asked to profit the world by our existence. We are allowed to be unique. We are not allowed to be useless. "The people I love the best," writes Marge Piercy, "jump into work head first without dallying in the shallows. When I visit my railroad and factory working relatives in Ohio, the greatest sign of a poor character is an unwillingness to put in a solid day's work. In every office I've ever set foot in, the people who are most resented are those who breeze in and out without regard for how much it takes to really get the job done. Whether they are blissfully unaware or calculating and savvy, they make others pick up their slack. Managers who have never worked on the line and couldn't if they tried just don't get the same respect as those who sometimes jump in and do what has to be done. Go make yourself useful is something that many of us heard as a refrain in our childhoods when we were perhaps annoying our elders. but it was a command to remind ourselves of our obligation to add value to the world by our actions. The greatest spiritual challenge, then, for workers who are caught by financial need in jobs that are not just personally unfulfilling, but morally compromising, is the question of what use they are filling, whether that use is one that truly does add value to the world. What is it to work with love? It is to weave the cloth with threads drawn from your own heart, even as if your beloved were to wear the cloth. It's to build a house with affection, to sow seeds with tenderness and reap the harvest with joy, to charge all the things you fashioned with the breath of your own spirit, and to know that all the blessed dead are standing about you and watching. Folks who refuse to cave into the economic pressure, to pursue their art or craft, even though it will make a life financially on the margins and always precarious, they're thought to be, frankly, a little crazy. Their families worry about them, frustrated that they aren't ever likely to be self-sufficient. And maddeningly, they stay true to their principles. What seemed to their friends and family like the dire consequences of their lifestyle don't faze them at all. The possibility of homelessness, living without health insurance, eating only what comes free. But given the current state of panic in our nation, I wonder if it's time to consider whether those folks who have always been willing to consider the path that allowed them to work with love at whatever cost might just be onto something. It's time to consider how we might restore our spirits and our relationships with ourselves, with one another, with the earth, with God, by taking seriously the idea that our value and our values must be present in our work. We need to hold on to that idyllic notion of each of us finding fulfillment in work, of each coming to a way to be of service that will allow our spirits to shine forth and have also a decent standard of living. While we keep that vision before us, knowing that it might be very far off and very hard work to get there, it's important that we keep ourselves grounded in the need for basic human dignity for workers who are simply trying to offer an honest day's work to keep their families fed, clothed, and housed. The folks who are attempting to profit the world by their existence, and so often are seen simply as profit generators at the cost of their own existence. This holiday weekend dates to a time when it was still possible for us to believe that if enough people stood up for what was right, there was a chance that they could prevail. The trajectory of labor organizing was never easy, and it was always risky. The labor movement with a capital L and a capital M didn't always get things right. Labor organizations proved themselves just as susceptible to corruption and scandal as any other human organization. They've also had the single biggest hand in keeping workers out of poverty and enabling human dignity to factor into corporate consideration. Organized labor created and built the legislation that keeps our workplaces, regardless of how fulfilling they are, humane. Whether we're making sneakers or trading stocks, we benefit from the work of those who have gone before us, who cared that decent labor should get a decent wage, that people should be treated fairly for their work. Whether through organized labor in movements like we've known in the past, or by other means, the need for voices for worker dignity is as great now as it ever has been, especially as the rights of workers are denied when they're not U.S. citizens, and much of our cheap labor in this country exists under the radar of any of the laws we have. Supporting the rights of workers is as much a spiritual imperative as a moral one for Unitarian Universalists. If the Holy speaks through each of us no more or less than it did through the person of Jesus, we're called to ensure that the worth of each worker is protected and honored, that we as a nation are not profiting from the denial of another's humanity. To do so is really to deny a part of God. If, as our Universalist theology teaches, we're all bound to the same destiny, there will not be ritual rewards for those whose profits have been at the cost of others' well-being. So there should be no harm in curbing those profits in order for all to flourish and thrive. We are called to bring forth a new heaven and a new earth by our willingness to honor the sacred in one another, by the grace of a love that is greater than us all. Working with that love, out of that love, may mean that we need to drastically reconsider how we live. What would it look like to say together, we will no longer profit from the work of others whose rights are denied? What would it be like to live it? What could it mean to say together, we will live and work to keep peace with the earth and the soul of the earth, not to keep pace with technology or our neighbors? What would it be like to live it? What could it mean to say together, we will stand with our neighbors who are in need? We will work against the prevailing virtue of greed. What would it be like to live it? Whatever we may discover as we live our questions, we know we can't live into their answers alone. Let us pray that we will find the courage to live our values boldly and the wisdom to speak our peace kindly as we make our faith our work. So may it be. Please join me in prayer. Great Spirit, in whom we are one, God of mercy, God of grace, we lift up our hearts in gratitude for work that is real, for the mopping of floors and the changing of diapers, the raking of leaves and the cleaning of gutters. We give thanks for each and every time we have worked and felt fulfilled in the office or in the auto shop, in the classroom or in the garden. We lament the ways that human labor is used for private profit, and we regret that our lives have been enriched at the expense of others, who have sewn our shirts and made our children's toys, who clean our hotel rooms and assemble our computers. We lay before one another in your presence our questions about how to make justice. We lift up our fears and pray that by naming them, we can gain the power to transform them. We seek together the courage to speak for those who are silenced and the grace to meet and know them as our kin. We pray that we may be able to see the sacred essence in each person, to honor it knowing that we are all connected, and that connected we may find new ways to fulfill Earth's furthest dream, that we may dwell in peace and freedom, and our days be good and long upon the